Now,
Welcome to the Prisoner to Painter podcast, stories of inspiration, where we talk about mental health, addiction, religion, becoming a business owner and self-sufficient. For what, when, where, and why. Join us and we can be your local hope dealer.
Inspiration and dedication. I came a long way from sleeping in them pages. I got my life back. I feel amazing. Life's a book, don't get stuck on sad pages. Rainy days with no money. Hard work leads to days that are sunny. Looking back, it was all needed. The problems, the pain, the trauma, the grieving. You are now tuned in to the prisoner to painter. Prisoner to painter. Hard work, dedication. Rainy days, inspiration. Prisoner to painter.
And now, a word from your local hope dealer.
It used to be pretty hard to listen to and hard to sort of, but his job was like AV installation, and now he's working at the church primarily with doing AV on the side. So anyways, he's a wealth of knowledge and just like input and
no, that's perfect. And we got our sound good, and I hate throwing money at stuff, but sometimes that's what it boils down to. Like, well, it sounds not good, so throw money at it, and then in the terms of just buy something better, and then work.
We are.
Sounds good, but
yeah.
We are live.
Oh, good. Welcome to the Prisoner to Painter podcast. I'm McDermott,
And I'm Katie McDermott.
and today joining us, no relation, Victor McDermott. Thank you for coming on, man.
No relation.
Yeah, well, we know.
I have a cousin named Nathan, and until arriving here today, I was like half expecting it to be my cousin, who I would not have recognized, like, because it's been a while.
Yeah.
But anyways, yeah.
That's fine. Well, I messaged you, and the old joke in my family, my grandpa used to get around, so I'm like, oh well, maybe there's a relation down the line somewhere.
There's apparently more McDermott in Jackson than I was aware of, because anytime I go to the store and like I show my ID for anything, they're like, "Oh, are you related to this person?" I'm like, "No,
We sure.
probably not." I haven't met a lot of them except for his family. So
Yeah, but we're out Hartwood way. So, but anyways, here we I give the same stick. There's no agenda. We just want to learn your story, from childhood to where you are now, and what your definition of success is. I feel like learning somebody's story shows more of who they are now. So, like, a successful person, but a bad childhood. I mean, it shows the success. I mean, it shows how important growing up is in some aspects. So, normally my first question is a pretty broad statement, but how was your childhood in a broad sense?
I mean, in a broad sense, it was, I think, pretty like standard or normal or unremarkable, or at least that's how I hope to
gonna turn it on silent.
Yeah,
I hope to frame it because I try to resist the urge to see myself as sort of like special or whatever.
Yeah.
But there are certainly things about my childhood that I probably should identify as different than the average person. But I did, I'll answer this because at one point I wrote this musical that was called The Keeners Song. And I actually put it up here in town at a place that used to do small theater events called The Fourth Wall.
Okay.
And I did it then, and I had some of my theater friends help me. And it was I was afraid that it was going to be like a really indulgent project because essentially what it was a very childish motivation to explore a family dynamic that I was, exploring and inventing, And so I did not know like my dad's side of the family, the McDermotts.
Okay.
There was very loose connections, no grandparents on that side. And one defining thing that I grew up just being aware of was that my dad's mom died on his 7th birthday. Right? It was just a fact that like I knew growing up, and there wasn't a lot of like, family members around to sort of like talk about any other, dynamics, right? There was that we had one uncle, and that's the uncle that would have been the one that I was sort of suggesting.
Oh, okay.
His name was Tim. We called him Slick.
That's my dad's name. I swear that's my dad's name. That's funny, man. That's
We might be related, dude.
yeah, that's my dad's name.
The longer this conversation goes, I mean, so anyways, so I wrote this musical to sort of fill in the blanks, right? And it was like a family history, but it was invented, but it was also sort of like exploring, which is what a child might do, right? They might say, oh, my great-grandparents did this, and they, and they had this and all of that. And the more I sort of like thought about it, and some of the dynamics surrounding my dad's story was that it's probably more likely that, well, I was told that it was a brain tumor, right? But probably it was a brain aneurysm, and probably caused by domestic violence. That's the conclusion that I sort of like had to sort of like arrive at as I was sort of like exploring this story, and that, the progression of learning that about my dad went beyond his death, but it was like that was a thing in my childhood that just kind of like always, was just a fact about my dad that, it was a long process of learning that about him. That being said, he was, him and my mom got divorced when I was 10. It was, there was alcoholism, there was domestic violence in that story. And there was a little bit of like what we call now bipolar, and my dad was a little bit on the like suicidal ideation, right? And he would talk in that mode to me and my brother. And I was the younger of my brother, and he kind of, my brother, in some sense, shielded me from some of that energy, just being sort of like younger of us. So I had a different perspective on to observe my childhood as it happened. And I did have that partnership with my brother in the sense that, we were in it together, and that was, that was formative. But, my relationship with my dad kind of went through this, because we, like, when I was about, I don't know, 15 or 16 or in my teenage years, that relationship became very just like chummy, and like, and he was kind of just like one of the people that would like hang around, or like, was very, very analogous to, just people in the friend group that were hanging out. And then it kind of shifted later on into, it became a caregiver, basically, kind of like role. But with my mom, and that's another thing. My mom, like, I think that I take after my mom more so, and I always had a very sort of like close relationship with my mom, or just felt like, I don't know, just connected with her.
Yeah.
And so I always had a really strong relationship there, and I continue to have a strong relationship with my mom. And it's it's Mother's Day
Yeah.
coming up. So there were things that probably like pretty average, and about like just like meeting family. My brother was getting online and like me, reaching out to some of the family members that after my dad's death, that we were connecting with, and his brother died, and my brother became aware of it. So this would have been our uncle, who I knew existed but had never met.
Okay.
But then I found out that he died, and then me and my brother attend this funeral, and this was at Ypsilanti. My dad grew up in Ypsilanti, and so we knew like there was this sort of like local story. We lived in like Hudson Addison,
Okay.
in Lenawee County, which is kind of rural, but we weren't farmers by any means, but it was definitely like small town, frame. But I knew that there was this sort of like Ypsilanti story. And anyways, we went to this funeral, and there was all these people that looked exactly like us, or that like, it was like, oh, these are all our family that we had like never met. And it was a very interesting moment to just be at this funeral, and I had some things to share and whatever, and the commonality, that's what I was getting at.
Yeah.
It's like the truth is that my story wasn't exceptional, right? That all of these people that were related to me had similar stories, but on the other hand, we don't want to normalize something that's like, no way, but that was weird, or that was like not what I'm going to do, because I can identify it as being sort of like not the usual thing, right? It's like you have to sort of. So that's been the balance of trying to. I mean, there's also this. There was also this. Dare I say? No. Growing up, I was always really good at school.
Okay.
And that definitely, that feeling of like, and when that got translated into music, there was a sense of like exceptionalism, or it's like, wow, I'm really good at this thing, and I mean, I was good at like some sports, or like, I mean, there was an acknowledgement, not so much like from me, but I started getting a lot of feedback from other people, and that's how it goes,
It's
right?
a good feeling, yeah.
Yeah, and you're like, and everybody starts responding that, oh, you're really good at that thing, and I'm like, oh, I guess I am. I'll do more of that, and the balance between like which one plays a bigger role, right? Is it how we've been encouraged versus natural ability, or that's something that I still I teach these days. As a teacher, I try to find a balance, in all of that. But there was definitely a sense about myself that I was reading between the lines, and that was when it came to my family as well.
Yeah.
In the sense of, I was like, I know what you're telling me, but I'm not buying it very early on.
Yeah. I'm not buying what you're selling, man. Yeah. Well, I have to ask, just for my own curiosity, what was your uncle's name? That
George.
George. Okay, no. If you said Tom, I was gonna shut it down. No, you know, this is over. No, we lost an Uncle Joe and Uncle Tom. So I was like, if you said one of those names, I was really gonna be enthralled. So wow. So thank you. I always compliment my guests. I feel like compliments. it should just be a natural part of life. But I say that because some people you have to pry information out of, and I just love the conversation that we're already having. So thank you for being so open and willing. So,
You
go
said you were good at some sports. Did you play sports in school? Like, and which ones?
I did, I did all of the sort of like Little League, Pop Warner, what do they call the hockey without skates? Floor hockey.
Yeah.
So I did all of those as a young, kid, just, always doing whatever was in season. And I might have actually continued down that path. The move to Jackson from Addison changed some of that because it became very clear that I was not going to make any of the teams. And I did try out for basketball. Football was like, these kids were big, right?
Yeah. Yeah. There's some killer football
Yeah,
teams here.
My family also, which is why I'm just getting chuckled on this. My Uncle Joe and Aunt Sherry were so related by siblings. So my Uncle Joe was married to my Aunt Susie. My Aunt Sherry is married to my Uncle Pat at that time. They both they both lived in Addison. So I'm familiar with the Addison area. And so it's funny you say that because Addison's so small, and then Fowlerville is huge where I come from. So I grew up in Fowlerville, and going to Jackson, total change of pace. But yeah. So I'm just, I guess, relating. Long story short, I would call that. But
It's funny. There's a lot of similarities,
Yep.
and it's the same last name. So that's crazy to wrap your brain around. But
so my next question was, so you grew up in Addison. When did you move to Jackson, and what is your favorite childhood memory?
I moved here right around like the age of 12, 13.
Okay.
My mom got remarried to my stepdad.
Okay.
And he was a very sort of like, generally a positive influence in my life.
That's a blessing, because sometimes step parents are the opposite. So that's a blessing, definitely. Cool.
As far as like my favorite childhood memory, it'd have to, because, I definitely, looking back, I might include a different like 10 years into what I would describe as my childhood,
Mhm.
Than I would have been. Right. Like, so when I was 16, I was like, still a child, but I was maybe like acting like an adult. And so it'd be weird to frame it as a childhood memory. Yeah. But certainly there was things that I did when I was like 16 and 17 that were like exciting and like, and fun and that set me on certain paths of being like, this is what I want to do, like with music, right?
Mhm.
It's like having like some of those experiences where things were really clicking, and like you were like, oh, this is good, this is fun. Those experiences are probably in there somewhere. I don't know if I could pinpoint one specific thing, but it was more of like the activities that I recall, because we would just hang out and like make beats in the basement, and then like go play basketball at the Bloomfield Park, and it was just like, right here on Union Street, and then we had some friends that lived around the corner on Biddle Street, and just like having that the feeling. I became very Jackson home team like oriented, right? It's like I definitely like fell into sort of like this idea that like this is and that got interpreted in other ways of just feeling like this is I feel comfortable on these streets.
Yeah.
I feel at home here, and like having the people and the just the touch points that it probably like what I would say is like feeling like I was a member of like this block or something like that.
Yeah.
Like
That's a
the
belonging.
spirit.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah. It's a very cliche question, but I ask every single guest. And I say cliche because people say it, they wouldn't go back and change anything because their life wouldn't be the same. But I still ask, if you could go back in time and change one thing, would you? And what would it be?
You know, if I could go back in time,
Are you asking pertaining to like childhood right
Well, in that area, you discussed like childhood could be 16, 17 down. So just in the area we were just talking about, if there's anything that you would change in that time. And the reason I asked that is because clearly the butterfly effect, your life would be different. But like, let's say nothing changed. One thing you would change from there.
I mean, to avoid answering the question, in terms of like regret,
now?
right?
Yeah.
Because I don't feel like an answer to the question, right? Because it's like we all have regrets.
Yeah.
But it's more not that I would change anything, but I wish I could convince my younger self of things.
Right.
And that would be to, start saving $100 a month into a 401k.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Or, that type of stuff. Or just to play a long game, because I've been playing a long game, turns out.
Yeah.
I was so rushed and so like, and that, I guess, to double back on my answer, that did like push me forward. There was an urgency to everything that I did when I was young, but it was short-sighted. And there was, I wished I could have seen the long game and understand that like I would be in this place, still doing some of the similar things, but knowing that like, things don't, what do I want to say? Like, that you just pick up skill sets along the way and you pick up, and that every opportunity is, I just approach things so much differently now.
Yeah.
When I say like, oh, like this is an opportunity to just learn this new thing or like, pick up this skill set and like, and that could be anywhere along the way. And, and I was just impatient, and
Yeah. Gotcha. I know that.
Kids don't have the self-inflection to like realize certain things, and then that also comes along with like growing up. Like when you get older, you learn from your lived experiences, and then you learn what has been taught to you from those experiences. So like I think as like a young kid, it's like you're not thinking about what's going to happen when you're 30, 40. Like you're not. And I know that I was a stubborn kid. Would you say that like if you could meet younger you guys would get along, or?
No, probably not. Because I used to look at people, particularly when it comes to like, music or the arts, right? Because I used to look at people in my position, but I try to reflect on that. I try to be like, don't be like one of those people that you did not like. So, I think my younger self would dislike me, or not dislike me. I think we would be in a competition, right?
Yeah.
That's the way I would see it. I'd be like, oh, this guy, that has been doing. See, this is where it would be different, right? Because my younger self would be like, man, these old guys, they're doing the same old thing that they've always been doing, and I'm going to do something different, right? And so that's the energy I try to live with now. It's like, don't fall into this routine. Don't fall into this like comfortable space of this is what I do. You know what I mean? And to continue to reach outwardly. But my younger self would have thought that about myself, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I was probably wrong about the people I was thinking about in some ways, but and especially as it pertains to like resources, because I was pretty I mean, I had certain resources that other people didn't have. But, I was also like, they had limitations, and they were frustrating limitations. And I used to look at it, other people that had like, all of this stuff, and think like, boy, they're not doing anything with that stuff. If I had their stuff, I'd be doing so much more, and nowadays I'm like, boy, I got some stuff. And I don't think I want to help you out. Or, it's like, you're like, you have to earn it, like in a different way. Like you have to, like, sometimes I have, one of my new projects in town, which, might as well bring this up, is to have like a studio space or like a sound stage over at the Commercial Exchange. And it is to open something up for the community so that younger people coming up can have like a little platform, because like a lot of that I didn't have access to. And nowadays there's lots of, the home recording and but we were in the basement, like using like these little Dr. Rhythm machines, that were like as big as fit in your glove box. And with a screen that you had to like, anyways, we were like, we were like wringing the usefulness out of these like very, simple machines, and now it's like, there's so much availability of technology and stuff like that. But then like, we're kind of like, we don't have some of the platforms or some of the, the sort of connectivity or whatever it might be that, I know now is the difference. It isn't the piece of tech that you now possess, right? It's right. But back then I was like, oh, if I could just buy this thing, if I could just get my hands on this thing, and that's, I'd like to think that there are young people, to answer the question in a different way. I'd like to think that there are young people in the town right now, in the space that I was in, trying to be a creative, that I would get along with. And I hope we're in competition.
Yeah.
Right.
I got them all day.
Well, there you go. That's perfect. So I won't stay too much longer in the growing up part, because I have a lot of questions actually about what you do now. So you kind of answered most of them, which is actually great for me. But so you started in Addison. I'm assuming that's where you started at school as well.
Yeah.
Okay. So I won't ask too much about elementary, but what was the transition like going from elementary, middle school, and then moving schools to, I'm 13, you're probably right around high school, moving to Jackson?
Did you go to JPS?
I did. Yeah. I went to Hunt for 1 year when I first got here. I met some people that remained, pretty close friends. It was always these sets of brothers. This is an interesting thing. And it was John and Sean King. It was Zach and Jeremy. It was Scott and Ricky. They weren't brothers, but they might as well have been. And, it was it was all of these sets of brothers, that we tended to, become acquainted with, to befriend. And I met some Curtis and Daniel Winters. I met Daniel at Hunt, and then I went to Parkside, and it was pretty much at Parkside when my interest in school evaporated. I mean, I was always really good at school, and had no struggles with school until I stopped going. Like, it was
Funny how that works. Yeah. Well, dude, this is perfect. Like, really, I'm sorry, and I smile a lot, because this is I don't idolize all my guests, but clearly you're on here for a reason, because I'm enticed by something you do, or I see something successful. So I'm smiling over here. It's funny because I feel a lot of our story overlap. I try to relate with every guest. I moved to Jackson when I was 13. The first couple of years here for me were hard. I'm not putting words in, but the first couple of years for me, transitioning was very difficult for me, because I went from, I'll use the words, I was a foot fairy. I played soccer. East Jackson had nothing like that. So it was football or nothing. I mean, so I'm like, now I'm not athletic anymore. So it was just a hard transition for me. But
Would you say, I don't want to like label the town. I have heard, like, for instance, with Nathan, he was in the middle of the country. And when he moved here, he got in with the wrong crowd. Is that like a relatable experience, like doing, I don't want to say crime, but like doing hooligan type stuff?
Well, I think that was maybe part of the thing. And it goes back to sort of like starting to realize, that, what was natural to me maybe wasn't a typical story, because, I definitely like gravitated to kids that were, I had, in my situation, it didn't feel like this at the time, but, I can certainly reflect back on it because we like took a step up when my mom got remarried to my stepdad.
Mm-hmm.
We took a step up in the sort of socioeconomic,
Right.
paradigm, and it was working class, but it was like, it was still up.
Mm-hmm.
And for that matter, credit to my stepdad for teaching me a trade, and that trade got me through, a couple decades of figuring myself out, and so I was able to sort of like make money,
Mm-hmm.
and and be a carpenter, right?
Okay, awesome.
And that was just something I always had, and if I didn't have that, that was something that the friends that I made when I first came to Jackson were the people that I just was naturally gravitated towards,
Mm-hmm.
and they tended to be in the socioeconomic bracket that I was coming from. Right. And so I had a little bit more resources than them, and I had this sort of access. I learned a trade, and so like I can see that my life went in a different direction than some of the people that I was hanging with, right, in middle school and high school. Because they didn't have somebody that taught them a trade, and we all dropped out of high school, but they had to do different things to make it work. And then music, and then again, a credit to my stepdad, but also my mom. What I did have was my stepdad was a bandy,
Okay.
and we had a jam room in the basement, and that's where we would hang, and and we just spent hours and hours down there, and so that was, there was definitely, some hooligans going on, but I definitely observed more than I participated in, right?
Okay.
It was like, oh, so-and-so is doing this, these other folks were doing that, and they were friends of ours, or like they were, people on the block, but I kind of, stayed out of getting in, like music and carpentry, kept me from getting in too much trouble too young,
What's the saying?
Idle hands are devil's work.
Yep.
Yeah.
But we definitely like, were, potheads and like, I mean,
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's, again, like, not saying things are normal, but there is a lot of overlap with people and who come here and live here, where it's like, regardless of like generation, I feel like the experiences are very similar, and they may have changed with like the technology and the time and things like that. But it's wild how much you hear people kind of had a similar childhood, even though it's like, Jackson has changed in the last, let's say, since I was a kid. So I'd say the last like 20 years.
Well, in music, and I tell this to my students all the time, and because I mean, as far as sports go, and there's, the idea that, people are going to get, some sort of college scholarship or something like that, which are very rare. And I mean, performance jobs in music are very rare as well. But what's not rare is like people that get together and play music. I don't see a lot of people, certainly my age or like, past high school that have the opportunity to play a lot of organized sports.
Yeah.
Right. It's
Yeah.
like some of that disappears on a social level for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And whereas like music is something that there's a lot more opportunities to continue to do that, you know, and I sort of like preach that to my students all the time that, you know, that music is probably something that you can find a lane for past high school. Sports you can too. It just takes a little more effort,
Yeah.
you know, right? And you got to like really seek it out.
Yeah, and it also depends like where too. Like Lansing's got like indoor sports or whatever, which is nice
Yeah.
for year round. But some cities like there's
I mean, we
maybe
did
a flag
briefly-
football team. You
We
know,
did
but-
briefly.
yeah.
But I think that went away. I think it was like a baseball thing out by 145.
Yeah, but Cooperstown too.
Yeah.
But I don't want to stay too much in one part of your story, so thank you for informing us about your childhood. Clearly one of the big reasons I invited you on, I've seen that you were a music head, and I see you play violin and guitar, and I'm sure much more. So I wanted to make sure I had enough time time is irrelevant right now. But what came after high school, and when did you discover your love of music?
So, you know, I remember like being like interested in like vocalizing and singing and like, you know, being interested in music as a sort of listener. But it truly was, it was, you know, it was coming to Jackson and having that space in the basement. I was given a guitar when I was like 10. And I just kind of just like played it all the time. I don't know if I would describe that as a discovery of the love of music. I definitely enjoyed having it in my hands, and like it was definitely like a good fiddle, you know. But you know, I don't know, because the question, you know, it kind of comes, you know, like if you say that, you know, if you talk to a couple, you know, you say like about like when did you like fall in love, or tell me about falling in love, you know, I think that, you know, you could say, oh, well, this is when we met, and like, you know, our early sort of like, you know, infatuation, or our early, you know, it kind of tracks like that, because, you know, with each passing period or sort of season of life, I'm like, I thought that was love, but really I was maybe misguided, right? And now I've discovered this much richer love, you know, and it's continued to sort of like develop like that. But certainly it was right around 10 when like it became apparent that this is something I do, you know, 10 and so on. By 16, it was a social thing,
Yep.
you know, and it helped me to like make like friends, and even to this day, it's still a social thing to get me out of the house. To, you know, I'm not the type of person that really is going to go up and talk to people, you know, and so it gave me a job at the party, you know,
Right.
and it gives me a job at like the club or the bar or the, you know, or whatever. It's like, I'll be in the corner playing music, you guys socialize, and I like to watch what's happening. But, you know, if I was not doing that, I'd probably just be in the corner, just not playing music,
Right.
you know, like,
Yeah. I resonate with that. I understand. I mean, I'm not musical, but I understand what you're saying.
But I will say I did, just to try and move things up, I did discover music as an academic thing, and in that arena, I made some friends that have actually shifted my life into a new direction, and it was discovering that there was this thing called music therapy. And that really, you know, slowly changed, you know, a lot of the ways that I, you know, would express a sort of like love for music. And that, you know, not to lead the next question,
No,
but like,
you're good. No,
it did change my concept of success,
awesome.
because, you know, I used to, you know, there was this creative success on like, am I doing something that's cool? Am I doing something that's relevant, something that's progressive, something that's new, next, all of that? Maybe there was a sense of like, am I doing something that is technically proficient? You know, can I stand on anything that's like, you know, categorically good, you know, in the sense of like, you know, of being proficient on my instrument? That's academics, right? But music therapy, you know, led me to this place to define success as, am I doing something that's useful to other people? You know, and is this improving the lives of the people around me? And that, you know, that was kind of an eye opener when I had to sort of like, you know, make that shift.
I like that.
When did you start getting into teaching music?
So it was a slow transition. I started volunteering at this music therapy camp called Eric Rickstar Music Therapy Camp. We've been doing it for like, I've been doing it for so long now. I'm a fixture, and we just did a documentary not too long ago that I was a part of, and so that was pretty exciting. And it's been something I've carved out this time for every summer for maybe 15 years now. But I started volunteering there just because I had a friend that was working in mental health services, and they had become acquainted with this music therapist in town, a person that I still work with, very much so right now. And they were interested in performing more and joining a band, so to speak. And so they had asked me to come do an hour at a music therapy camp. And then the following year, so I was just like a guest. You know, they were like, oh, you know, a guest that came in and just filled one of the hours. The following year, I filled a day. The next year, I filled a week. You know what I mean? And it just kind of progressed like that. And then I had a recommendation to teach. I never wanted to be like a band teacher.
Right.
And when the academic music pursuit, it was like, well, you can go for the 1% of jobs that are like for musical performance. And that's in the academic sense. I've come to learn something different than that, but they're thinking like in string choirs and whatever, you know, or you can teach, right? It's like you can learn like how to program a halftime show at a football game, or you can go into some other area. Music therapy was a little bit of a sidetrack in that. I've come to realize that there's actually a lot more work for the performer, especially if you're willing to serve people.
Right.
Right. And so that's actually a little bit of a misconception that I take beef with academia.
Right.
Right. Because they don't do well at sort of like pointing, you know, and probably other creative aspirations as well. But, you know, they don't do well at saying like, there's actually work here. You just got to shake it down, you know. But I was recommended by a friend of mine that was just a fan of mine. You know, it was just somebody that I knew who had a child who was diagnosed with, I believe it was autism spectrum disorder. And they were going to a school in Ann Arbor that was a very small private school called Ann Arbor Academy. And so I got a personal recommendation because their band teacher had to leave unexpectedly, and they were looking for a fill-in. And they said that this parent of this child said, if I wanted, you know, somebody to be teaching my kid, I'd want it to be this person. And so I got this really generous recommendation. I went and applied, and it was absolutely the music therapy camp on my resume that got me the job above other applicants. And I know this because the other applicants eventually did get jobs as the school grew, right? And they were like, yeah, I applied at the same time you did. And it was absolutely that got me the job. And it was a very similar story that I started teaching like one class, and then I eventually took over the drama department. And then I eventually, which was small, the drama, you know, that was the, you know, I tell I'm like the director of 5 things at my school because we're like it's 100 kids, right?
Right.
So I eventually was able to leverage my skill set as a carpenter into a full-time position because the arts weren't really offering a full-time position. So I was like, well, what if I take on some of these facilities management items, as well as do the drama program and teach the band. And then I developed a vocal program. And then now I'm doing early childhood stuff, which is like,
That's great.
That's awesome. Dude.
Yeah, and that's what I do with the music therapy clinic here in town. It's Harmony Garden Music Therapy Services. And we have a band that's preparing for our spring kickoff concert. And we're doing early childhood music at Cascades every, what is it, second Tuesday of the month or something like that. I don't want to, but it's coming up next week. And so it's very in sync with, one thing I've been good at in all of that is making my job and then my like pastime and like my hobby, I've been able to really just get a lot of commonality in those two, and probably just because of like stubbornness in some ways. Well, I say perseverance maybe in other ways, but like I've definitely been good at making money doing my hobby, and being able to transform my job into my hobby.
Right.
Man, it's kind of crazy to me because some of these questions, it seems like you knew what I was going to, because I'm like, a couple of my questions was, how do I line up your job with your hobby together? But you can answer my question, so this is phenomenal. Another thing I want to touch on, she works in the mental health field, and I am in recovery. I was drunk 2 years ago, so anyway, if you ever need support, clearly you don't because you're doing it all on your own. But if there's any way we could support in the future, we'd love to. I just wanted to say that because that's phenomenal what you're doing.
We also feel very called to like serve people in any way that we can, whether that's sharing other people's stories so people like learn from them, or can like, if one person can take something from your story, then I think we
succeeded.
Yeah.
And it's funny, we learned that who Win Schuler is from Marshall.
Yeah.
So his stick was
Hospitality.
he just loved serving people, and I don't know why when we read that, but it just like it stuck, man. Like that dude's dedicated his whole life to serving people, and that's so any way we could help is all I want to offer. What's your favorite color?
Oh, that's a nice off throw.
Oh, I get that from some of my students occasionally. And my prepared answer is that I try not to have favorites because sometimes it's just downright rude. But for the sake of answering your question, I've got to say blue. And it's probably just because of the University of Michigan, go blue,
Yep.
Yeah, and I tend to wear a lot of blue because again, the Lions and I don't know, stuff like that.
Well, and you're very educated, so this is a question off the dome with color theory. You're very educated and smart, and like in drama and whatnot. Do you think your favorite color has anything to do with like how blue invokes certain emotions?
I mean, in some ways, perhaps. I think it. There's an old actress, I can't remember where the quote comes from, but there was an old Hollywood actress that said, deep down, I'm pretty superficial. No.
Is it Elizabeth Taylor? I feel like it's Elizabeth Taylor.
No, it's probably just because it was my eye color, really, that I grew up thinking like, oh, my eyes are blue. I think my favorite color is blue. But I've looked into some of that color theory stuff too, and certainly like when it comes to jazz and blues, and that became a vocabulary that certainly like I mean, I started off in music, doing something that was just like very like just going after it. It was like I don't know what I'm doing. But definitely like the path of learning the sort of like vocabulary of jazz and blues, and certainly just been infectious for me, and like, and I've been able to, resonate with that, and just like feel, I've been on this thing, I feel like I'm very interested in world music, but then also the other side to that of, as you explore music outwardly, you also, become more aware of your own. It's like going somewhere where there's like people have accents, right? It's like, and then you start thinking about, oh, do I have an accent, right? And so it's kind of exploring world music makes me a little bit more interested on, like, I wonder what the sort of like accent of here is.
I've been told that we say our A's weird.
We do. Ann Arbor.
Yeah. Colorado. Sorry.
And I apologize getting up there. I try to go live on my phone as well, just to
Different perspective.
well, and go through TikTok, and every like 40 minutes, and actually drag a little piece because I'm inactive. And I'm like, God, now how do I do that without getting up? I have not found out how to do that without getting up yet.
Anyway.
Yeah. So sorry about that. But one of the questions I really wanted to ask: what kind of emotions or messages do you hope to invoke in your listeners?
Oh, these days? So, with the stuff that I've been working on, like now, because this is something actually that's been in my mind this past week of like what I'm trying to invoke in the material that I'm working on. One thing is a sense of place. Goes back to the whole accent thing, like, and it is about, home team, and sort of like, if you're in Michigan, if you're in Jackson, Michigan, like there's reasons to sort of, celebrate. And I try to, I'm not, I'm a fan of lots of stuff, right? But what I'm not a fan of is like the focus on celebrity culture, and especially in the music and in the arts, it's like, I try to redirect my students as much as possible to say like, look, there's people out there doing stuff that's great and that's, well known and that's, popular or whatever. But there's, I like to think that like the biggest, people ask me about my influences, and it's very true that, when I think about my influences, these were people that I knew, right? That I was in contact with. I saw them doing their art, and I hope to be that, so, but deeper than just like being in front of people and demonstrating how it's done. Yeah. I hope they get a sense of place and a sense of like, like present in the moment, right? To sort of like, this is really cool what's happening right here, right now. I want people to sort of like feel good about, about what they're doing in that moment, and not be sort of like anxious about, what they could be doing otherwise, or, they got to get out of this town or something like that. So I try to give that across. I try to have an emotional arc, right? And I can sometimes get pretty emotional, sort of like on stage. And part of it is just the training as an actor, that we sort of just get comfortable with, that modality. But it is, sometimes it's involuntary in some sense, to where it's just like, I purposely put stuff there. I tell people when I'm writing, I know if I'm onto something good, which, I write a lot of stuff and I just kind of sit through the bad stuff. So I there's a lot of stuff that's just like throwaway, but the more I do it and the sort of like more aware I become of the process, I can kind of like know when something's going somewhere. And it often is if I have an emotional reaction to it. And really it boils down to, does it make me cry? Does it make me laugh? You know what I mean? And then if it does one of those things, I think we're on to something.
Yeah.
In between there, does it make me think? Does it cause me to reposition my viewpoint? Does it challenge something that I held as truth?
How do you feel about like experimental sound?
I'm more open to it. One thing that I have a very high tolerance for is unfamiliar music.
Okay.
Right. And I can go and I can just listen to something that I've never heard before and like be into it. I know that not everybody can tolerate,
It's like a palette, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And I'm definitely like on board, for, but I'm also sensitive to the needs of an audience. So if that's where the indulgent kind of thing comes in, where it's just like, man, if I was going to, I would definitely be probably much more experimental than maybe the audience would care for.
Right. Do you have a question?
Yeah. I trolled a little bit, and I know it's gonna be a long answer. Well, not a long answer. That doesn't matter. I said that wrong. Where all have you performed? I know it's gonna be like a big list.
Oh, I mean, I performed around town, all the bars and restaurants, coffee shops and stuff like that. There was a period of time that we were really into busking, and we would just like go to different towns, and we would go to art fairs, and we would go to farmers markets, and we would do a lot of busking, and that was just like a thing that we did. I've done, I've contributed to several churches. I've performed at sort of like the theaters as like an actor doing musicals.
I'm curious
Yeah.
about your musical list because I love musicals. That's my thing. I can't stand them. So
Well, it's not that okay. She is a theater. She is.
I was the theater.
Yeah. So this is and that's why we kind of co-host, because it's like, because a lot of people I can relate to, but there's a lot of people she can relate to. So
We have
it works
different-
out perfect.
We have different palettes of hobbies and interests. So
Yeah, for being married, we're two totally opposite people. I mean, same, but opposite.
Different.
Very opposite.
anyways, yes.
Well, getting to know the theaters that are around, and that's like the Mendelssohn in Ann Arbor. At JC, they have a wonderful facility, and like you become a connoisseur of the spaces.
Yeah.
Right. And when I go to see a show around, half of my decision is if it's worth it to go watch this band is where is it at? Because if it's at a no good theater, I mean, or like a theater that's not meant to be a theater, like an arena, or
Right.
it's like, where is it at? But I did perform once upon a time at Lambeau Field with Kelly Trudell, and that was a pretty fun experience. She was doing some like veteran support, and they led us to Lambeau Field to do this, like there was this moving monument of the Vietnam War memorial.
Yep.
That this probably is like, extra that I could get as far as Lambeau Field.
That's cool. Man, just a quick little snippet. Kelly Trudell, or something Trudell, does she have a son named Logan by chance?
I don't believe so.
Okay. I was just curious. I've worked with Logan at Trips for about 5-6 years now, and his last name is Trudell. I don't know any other Trudells besides him.
I believe that you can learn a lot from somebody based on their favorite musical. What
Yeah.
is your favorite musical?
I'm just going to answer your question with a knee-jerk reaction because, again, like the musical that I would love to do, and with the Michigan Theater recently, I'm hoping that they're sensitive to doing some stuff like this. But I would love to do Hedwig and the Angry Inch.
Okay. See, I know that I don't know if we still do it. It's been a minute since they did like the Rocky Horror and things like that.
I'm putting it out to the universe that we're going to do a live stage version of the Rocky Horror at the Michigan Theater this October. I haven't got don't let me, I'm putting it out there. You should call up and request
See, I
it.
know that the Glorious Garters did it for a while. I just haven't seen a showing in the last couple of years, and I went a lot. Also, like Repo and Sweeney Todd, I would love to see like Rocky style, like the shadowing with Sweeney Todd. I think that'd be super cool. Yeah.
Okay. No, that's cool. I'm trying to understand what I can. So I know you said guitar, and I picked out violin just by your profile. What instruments do you play?
So, guitar, and that led me into bass because upright bass was like an academic pursuit. I started playing piano because of like trying to like program.
That's cool to me. Sorry, piano. That's hardcore to me, man. That's cool.
I was really just like a programmer when it came to the piano at first, making beats and like programming electronic music. But eventually, through practice, and I can hold it down on the piano these days. And I started playing upright bass, which is what led me into the viols, which would include sort of like the cello is my latest thing that I'm trying to get my mind around, and percussion was something that I always just like enjoyed, and if I collect anything, well, I collect musical instruments in general, especially the stringed instruments, so like banjo, mandolin, slide guitar, or like left steel stuff. But percussion, I love to collect drums from around the world. So if people give me gifts or something like that, I try to make it easy for them. It's like just find some tchotchke drum thing, kid drums. That's how that stuff is. I do like that stuff, and I have a collection, especially weird noisemakers or things that have
like those frogs.
frogs and the and like the music therapy space definitely allows for a lot of that kind of different approaches to how to make something musical, and so I've big fan of the just the idea that anything could be turned into music. There was a show called Stomp to put a reference about like that kind of stuff fascinated me, just like everyday items being turned into musical.
Oh, like the Blue Man Group or whatever.
Yeah, but like people with the brooms. And
Yeah.
Okay.
So I do like to give just a little notice. Just in not, I've been doing it, and then I think back, God, maybe I shouldn't do it, but I'm still gonna do. Not to make you speed up your answers at all, but I'm nearing like the end of my questions. So I just give like a 10-15 minute heads up, so I'm not just abruptly.
Sure.
Thank you for coming on. Goodbye. Of that nature. So what do you do for fun besides music? Switch it up.
What do I do for fun?
Yeah.
So I like, I don't know if I call it fun, but I like learning new things. That's one of my favorite parts about my job, is that I get to explore things with my students. Especially at a school like ours, we get a lot of leeway to redesign curriculum.
Cool.
So if I have a student that's interested in something, we really go down that path, and it's what keeps me at my job and what keeps me going, to just learning new things, learning about new things. And that's great. I really love to cook. I'm a big, I'd have to say I'm a foodie.
Mhm.
I'm not the best gardener, but that's just because my other jobs and hobbies don't give me a whole lot of time. So I love to go to the farmer's market here in town. I love to seek out like food in that sense. And I do like to cook.
Have you ever been to Four Oxes?
I have been. I haven't. I plan to go probably very soon, because I only recently actually become aware of it.
The one in Lansing, and I think there's one in Battle Creek.
Yeah.
The one in Lansing is great.
Yeah, we used to live down the road. That place is,
You can spend all day.
You get lost in it too. Like, you get lost in that place.
I love to cook, and just to kind of offer this, to share, because I'm also in recovery.
Okay.
I quit drinking 2 years ago now, and it was the death of my brother that really brought that about. Not, that sounds, like it happened that way, but that's more the chronological order of things. not, there was obviously like lots of, thinking and, personal.
Well, there's like internal and external
Right.
happening. Right.
Yes, I understand. I quit drinking. It meter got in a fight, this, that, and the third. That was not why I quit drinking. There was a bunch before
Right.
it, but that is why I quit drinking. It's just the easiest way to explain it. So I totally understand. Just the order of how it landed.
But it sent me down this path because at my school and working in mental health, services are approximate to that.
Right.
I became very interested in this and the idea of motivators, especially like behavior modification and like, and all of that and how we're motivated. And I think concepts around attention and concepts around perseveration and concepts around addiction are all in this camp of like, motivating factors to people's behavior, and so I began to analyze my own behavior in this very sort of, I can't say empirical because it's not like I was taking a whole lot of data, but I was trying to sort of like just observe it, from the outside in. And it got me down this path of, it's like, well, okay, what is it going to feel like to not drink? What is it going to feel like to not, do this other thing, I quit smoking cigarettes and I went through a process of, the vapes and then a pipe and then, but eventually I got off the nicotine and then it became other things. And this is where it kind of like started to fall into my foodie, personality. Because, when I first quit drinking, I had this like insatiable sweet tooth, and I kind of like was able to be like, oh, it's because there was all the sugar and you know what I mean? And so now I am like on this path of like, I am what you could describe as a health nut. But it doesn't feel that way to me. I'm doing it not to be healthy per se. I just want to be like my actual self.
Right.
You know what I mean?
You put out what you put in, kind of thing.
And I felt like I was being motivated by all of these, these things in my life, whether it was addiction or whether it was, just like these motivating factors in my life. And yeah, it became things like sugar, but not just like sugar in its like, sweet form, but also was just like, with the potato chips and the oil and all that, so it's like, I've come to this conclusion in the past 6 months or so that I think that concepts like being hangry or having sort of like cloudy, unable to focus feelings surrounding being hungry, I have a theory that that's not hunger at all. That's withdrawal.
Yes, from all the stuff that's in our food that we should not be eating. Yeah.
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 And that hunger actually feels much, much different. And actually it'll sharpen you. It actually makes you like more alert. It actually hunger, by the natural design is supposed to, make you more efficient at getting food. And so, I've been like, and I know that's a little bit intense for like, I don't go to Thanksgiving dinner with that energy, but
Man. I could eat fast food. I'll tell you, they were withdrawals. It wasn't hungry.
It was like commercials would trigger him. Like, that sounds so good.
Yeah.
There's no way.
Yeah, I get that.
Oh,
I got one more question before my wrap-up questions, and then whatever you want to ask, of course. What are your thoughts on social media? And I'm going to open that question up a little bit, because you previously stated about technology and about with the music industry, that technology now, if you had it back when you were first starting and that whole conversation we had.
sure.
Social media plays a huge role, like even me doing my podcast. So what's your standpoint on social media in a whole?
Well, this actually spins off of, my last little rant there, because for Lent this year, I gave up YouTube because I was consuming YouTube like an addict. And it was the election cycle. It was all of that stuff. But I just found myself, that I would start consuming the short form content.
Yeah.
Like what I had to admit was in an addictive way. And I would not have known that if I hadn't been somebody that had come off a substance, and dealt with addiction in a very specific kind of way. I'm like, this feeling that I'm having in relationship to this behavior is very much like, the feeling that I had when I was drinking. So anyways, I got off the YouTube, and actually it's been really healthy for me. But I do love, I'm a content creator myself. Not, I don't spend as much time as I maybe would like in myself to spend on it, right? And I create things for the people around me, and I try to engage in creative activities, and I like the idea of having sort of that platform, and I think it's just a balance, It's a balance between, because now we have kids, and I struggle with students who, it's like, it's I think the conversation is like, can we create community without separating ourselves, because it's like, that's the balance between social media, right? It's like, oh, well, we're finding online communities, but we're becoming more isolated at home.
Well, I don't think COVID helped with that at all.
Yeah.
That's fair. And certainly from the educational world, we see a lot of that. And, and I tell my early childhood families that, not to put anybody, I'm not, again, like, I don't mean to like step on toes. I know that some of this energy is a little bit like intense, but I tell them that Cocomelon is like, a gateway drug to brain rot.
Yeah. Look, I've had kids. Okay. No, I was outside for the formative years as a child, so I didn't really have any of that until I was in my teens, really.
Yeah, so I'm scared of it, but not for the reasons like, oh, AI is going to take over. I'm scared for what's happening right now and right here. And it's just like, and I think that, we are exposed to an addictive environment, right? And that goes not only with, what's in our food or the substances you can buy at the corner store, but it also goes into, the technology. And so I'm definitely wary of the technology in that respect. Yeah. Am I worried about AI? Not so much, because, what I do think about, this type of stuff, and is that, when you really start to look at what human beings do and what human beings are going to do in response to AI, or what really, even the term AI, I struggle with, because, it's like, if you show me what's predicted, then I'm going to do something different. Mm-hmm. Right. And in fact, that's the cue for me to start doing something different.
Isn't that like I can't remember the law, the observation.
Yeah.
The law of observation. Can't remember the name. So like, if this is what we think is going to happen, and then we watch it and that doesn't happen, I feel like that's like pertinent to the AI conversation.
Yeah.
It's evolved, but
as a creative person, I say, do it. It's like, you can have a robot write, 1 million blog posts that nobody's going to read. Because I don't know who's reading these things, but it ain't me. Or, I just don't, it's like the constant contact thing. And then it's like, when it comes to like, definitely I use Facebook to connect with people, and all of that. But, and I know, geez, because there's a part of me that's like, oh, Vic, you should email this person, or you need to like do more, like, be present on social media and all of that. And, but then, there's part of me that says, man, I don't know. It's like, that was me like 10, 15 years ago when it was like, oh, this is what you got to do, or like, there's this level playing field, or like, all of this kind of stuff. I do think that I think that we are going to find, I think that I think we're going to be forced in some ways to find community a little bit closer. And I think that that's going to not only come from just not being served. I think we're just going to realize, like, oh, wait a minute, this new thing we're learning is a very viable tool, but it's not a replacement for anything. And
people can misuse tools too, right? Like,
yeah.
I mean, they can be helpful, but they can also be harmful.
Yeah, well, and the main reason that I asked that question is like, so I already have social anxiety. So now you're putting this tool in people's hands that now that's the only way they know how to communicate. I was from the, age that that's not the only way I know how to communicate. I just have a hard time communicating because social anxiety and whatnot. But now we're putting this thing in kids' hands. It's like, that's the only way they know how to communicate. So it's like mine is because anxiety, depression, childhood, whatever is why I have a hard time communicating. But now it's like not fair, I feel like, to today's generation, because
it's like an extension of them.
Yeah. So yeah.
Well, and there's the technifying of the classical arts as well, just to kind of get up on that soapbox, because I mean, there's no way around learning the piano, right? Besides sitting at the piano and playing the piano, there's no like, I mean, I use like YouTube tutorials, and they make me more efficient when I'm learning stuff. And it's like, if somebody else can show me, I mean, I'll learn, the Solo for Sweet Child of Mine from a 10-year-old online, like I'm not above that, but at the same time, it's like, that to me, that's not a tech workaround. That's just like sharing of information. And it's like, but you do have to put the guitar in your hands and make your fingers do the job.
What's that? It's like a video game. Is it Guitar Smith?
Guitar Hero was the big
No, there's one where like you plug an actual guitar in, and then
yeah.
there's like strings, and it teaches you how to play like
Sure.
through a video game. And like you can do like a piano on your phone, and it'll show you like the chords and the keys and things like that. But
Well, so my last wrap up, or my only wrap up question, is there anything I should have asked that I didn't?
I mean,
Sometimes I word that weird. This pretty much gets the point. If there's something that you'd like to share I didn't address, it's like, I guess I should word it like that.
I mean, being that it's so close to Mother's Day, I might be remiss if I didn't say that, I have mothers in my life, ones that have mothered my children and mothered me, that were, very patient and ultimately pretty supportive. There's definitely some sort of like red in my ledger of life, and I try to make good on that and all that investment and that patient that they put into me. And I try to sort of like say, okay, now, you've been given this, and if you can't start from here, I try to start every day, saying that, like, if I woke up into this world, into this life, could I make this work? And if I can't make this work, because things are pretty good, right? I mean, they're not, I mean, sure, you can want things, you can desire things, but like, if I can't look around me and say, okay, if I had to start here from this, like, I think I can make this work. Like, that's mostly, because of the mothers in my life. They've been great.
You just give me a hell of perspective. I don't wear it on my sleeve, but I just work has not been going good. You just gave me a new perspective, so thank you.
are you gonna ask?
Yeah, sorry, I apologize. We already touched on it, but I will always ask, no matter what, at the end, what is your definition of success?
Well, I kind of touched on it. It's, do people I mean, I said that, but that was, that was a little bit like about trying to talk about my music, and it was like, oh, music is entertainment, and instead of trying to see music as sort of wellness, and that was sort of my younger self trying to, find a path in music that was professional, but also creatively satisfying, and and so I've kind of grown, maybe even beyond containing it in that definition in relationship to music, right? Because it's like, okay, Vic, like, well, you do music, okay, but is that really what this is all about? And it's definitely like part of the vocabulary. But I don't think, sometimes I want to tell myself like, that, like, if I walk into a space, or I see like a gathering, or I don't know, whatever it is, I say, and I'm there to play music, I sort of ask myself, I was like, do these people even want music right now? Or like, is this like, is this what's even appropriate for this space? You know what I mean? And I guess, it's maybe what I'm trying to say is my definition of success, maybe as of late, is my ability to be like formless and flexible, right? And maybe it's like I'm trying to be a successful sort of like listener,
Okay.
more than like a person that's, always putting something out there, as I'm trying to pay attention,
Cool. Katie?
If there was one word that you could use to describe where you started to where you are going to end up, what would that be? One word.
Blessed.
I think we just had our first overlap. We've asked every single person this question, in the idea of that successful people, somebody will have the same word.
That's the analytical part of me.
Yeah.
Is like, I want to know how many people overlap and say the same thing as like the one word.
No, I don't recall who said that, but I think we finally had our first overlap. It just kind of us being scientific, not scientific, but you know.
Maybe.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
I don't know data, so.
So then one last thing before we wrap up. Well, I will ask you to sign the table, but we do that after we cut the camera. Aaron specifically from Farm Suds gave me soap to give you, but I also purchased a $25 gift card to go with it.
Oh, I thank you so much.
And so in the beginning, Julie worked as an RN with a research team pioneering innovative new treatments for serious medical conditions. Through some new discoveries offered hope, Julie felt that modern medicine was overlooking the potential effectiveness of a more natural alternative route to good health. It became her mission to explore the benefits of nature and to discover ways to soothe the mind, body, and soul using natural ingredients. Through her dogged research, a bunch of trial and error, and a keen sense of humor, Farm Suds was born. It all started with goat milk soap and continued on to include a natural skincare line that has become a local sensation. Now boasting 2 storefronts and a team of rock stars, science-minded, really nice and fun people, Farm Suds is a happy accident that became a fabulous thing. Located 109 South Main Street, Chelsea, Michigan. The phone number is 734-593-7030, or located in Jackson, Michigan, 299 South Mechanic Street, Jackson, Michigan. The phone number is 517-435-4076.
And Erin was super nice.
Very nice. And she spoke of the music therapy, and she sent me the link of how I was able to figure that out or to touch base on it. So, Victor, thank you so much, man.
Hey, thank you.
Seriously,
Thank you very much.
Great.
All
Awesome.
right.
Thank you guys for
thank you
joining us.
guys. And then if you wouldn't mind signing the table,
Yeah.
it is a paint marker,
So
so.
shake it up a little bit. Thank you, Katie. That was great. That was really good, man.